Scholars have debated for centuries the nature and timing of the Star of Bethlehem. Was it actually a star? Or was it a comet? A nova or a supernova? A meteor or an asteroid, maybe? A conjunction of two bright planets? Or simply an astrological interpretation of the constellations? In the beginning, God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times. Let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. The book of Job, the oldest book in the Bible, gives God credit with the creation of the stars and the constellations. Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls them each by name. He is the maker of the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades and the constellations of the south. In Psalm 19, not only does David extol God's handiwork in the stars, but he ascribes to the stars a means of communicating to the people. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. Now, David made it very clear, listening to the stars for signs is okay. Worshipping the stars is not okay. And he drew a clear line between what you may want to call astronomy and astrology. But 600 years before the birth of Jesus, Moses wrote about him in the book of Numbers. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel, batter the brow of Moab, and destroy all the sons of tumult. Second Temple Judaism, that's Judaism after the destruction of the first temple, interpreted the prophecy of the star as the coming of the Messiah. Justin Martyr, a first century Christian apologist, read it as indeed a prophecy of the advent of Christ. In Luke 21, Jesus told his disciples, "There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars." Did such signs announce his birth? Throughout the Bible, references to the stars, other than the people of Israel, will be as numerous as the stars, but there are many references to reading the stars. The Gospel of Matthew is the only book that mentions the star that guided the Magi, the magicians, from Babylon to Jerusalem. We know this much about the star. It signified birth. It signified kingship. It had a connection with the Jewish nation. It rose in the east. It appeared at a precise time. Herod wanted to know the precise time. Herod did not know when it appeared. He was not paying attention to the sky, obviously. It endured over time. It was not a flash. It went ahead of the Magi as they rode all the way from Babylon to Jerusalem and then south to Bethlehem, and it stopped over Bethlehem. Now, one might ask, why did the three kings visit Herod, and why in the first place did he grant them an audience? Did they drop by as a courtesy by royal protocol, or to proclaim the end of his kingdom? A new king was born. Or did they stop by because they lost the star and they did not know where to turn? Let's go check with the king, he might know which way to go. These three kings, the Magi, probably came from a highly renowned school of magic in Babylon at the time, which explains why Herod agreed to see them. The 600-mile trip from Babylon to Jerusalem through inhospitable landscape would have taken them about 4 months. According to Ezra, he began his journey from Babylon on the first day of the first month and arrived in Jerusalem on the first day of the 5th month. The 4-month journey eliminates several possible explanations of the Star of Bethlehem. Some theologians and historians believe that the constellation of Virgo, the Virgin, cradling a full moon, was the sign that a child, a king, was to be born. So they set out on their journey well before he was born so they can arrive in time. But we can rule out a nova, an exploding star, that turns hundreds of times brighter. Even a supernova in Andromeda, the closest galaxy to our Milky Way, is not visible to the naked eye. You need a telescope to see it. So that could not have been the Star of Bethlehem. And had it been, it would have taken the Magi in a circle, not on a 600-mile journey due west. Was it a comet? Some 2 centuries before the birth of Jesus, Chinese astronomers started documenting everything that disturbed the tranquility of the sky. They called very bright nova guest stars, and they called comets broom stars. The Chinese reported a broom star in 12 BC. What became known in 1759 as Halley's Comet, which returns to Earth every 76 years, passed around 12 BC, and it was the view of Halley's Comet in 1301 that inspired Italian painter Giotto di Bondone to paint a blazing comet above a stable with a newborn child in it. That launched a whole industry of Hallmark Christmas cards showing a comet over a manger. It is unlikely that the Magi followed a comet. Its position changes as the Earth rotates, and back then comets were seen as a bad omen in both Chinese culture and Eastern culture. Halley's Comet, nevertheless, may have played a role in the nativity story. As Matthew was writing his gospel, Halley's Comet passed again in 66 AD, may have jogged his memory to write about the Star of Bethlehem. We can rule out meteors as a Star of Bethlehem. They appear as short-lived flashes in the night sky. If you have spent long, cold nights lying on your back on a blanket waiting for a meteor in a meteor shower, you know that they could not have led them for 600 miles. Asteroids are also out, too dim and too fast. On Christmas Eve 2018, an asteroid 150 foot wide passed within 1 million kilometers of Earth and gave biblical scholars a reason to write about it and say, yep, that was the Christmas star coming back. If we rule out comets, nova, supernova, meteors, asteroids, we are left with a conjunction of 2 planets as a possible explanation. On December 21, 2020, planets Jupiter and Saturn came within a tenth of a degree of each other, and they appeared as a very bright star. I took out my telescope, drove up to the hill, and attempted to image them, but my attempt failed due to bad focus. But I digress. Let's get back to the matter at hand. Many astronomy programs today allow us to rewind the clock and see what happened around 0 BC. In the year 7 BC, Jupiter and Saturn had 3 conjunctions in the same constellation of Pisces. Since Jupiter is closer to the Sun than Saturn, the relative motion would have appeared retrograde over several nights. It would have stopped, basically. 3 conjunctions over such a short period could have guided the Magi. A note in the annals of the Abbey of Worcester from 1285 points to an alignment of Jupiter and Saturn at the time of the birth of Jesus. 4 years later, 12 August 3 BC, Jupiter and Venus, the brightest planets in our solar system, came together in a very bright light, the 1/5 of the size of the moon. And they remained close to each other all the way from August till next June, the following June, when they merged into a single star. They could have easily guided the Magi. But an even rarer event occurred on 17 April 6 BC, Jupiter rising before the Sun and was occulted, was covered completely by the moon. In old astrology, lunar occultation of a bright star foretold a royal birth. On that same morning, Jupiter, Saturn, Moon, and Sun lined up in the early hours, potentially causing the Magi to lose the star and stop at Herod's for direction. That alignment would have gone away the following day, and they would have seen again the bright star to follow. Pinpointing the exact time or date of the birth of Jesus requires aligning it with the census. Luke wrote, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that the census should be taken of the entire Roman world. We don't want to miss out on taxes." This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And everyone went to their own town to register, so Joseph also went to Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, from Nazareth to Judea to Bethlehem, the town of David. He was there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. Caesar Augustus ruled from 31 BC to 14 AD. Quirinius ruled Syria from 9 BC to 6 BC. These dates concur with the census that took place March to April of 6 BC. Taking such data into consideration, astronomer Michael Mohar determined that 20 March of 6 BC was the most probable date of the birth of Jesus, but not necessarily the date of the visit of the Magi. If they started their trip when Jesus was born, they could have arrived when he was a child, not necessarily still a baby. This is where the plot thickens. Jewish historian Flavius Josephus wrote a lot about Herod. He was a first century historian. According to a 1544 printed manuscript on the works of Josephus, Herod died in 4 BC. But every Josephus manuscript dating before 1544 showed Herod's death in 1 BC. A typesetting error by the printers may have changed history by 3 years. And if we were to allow all the way to 1 BC, then we get a very interesting conjunction. Planet Jupiter, the greatest of the Roman gods, and the star Regulus, the little king in the constellation of Lion. In 1 BC, Jupiter the Roman god, danced around Regulus in the early morning sky, worshipping the newborn king, the little king. And then Venus joined them into a very bright star. Thanks to retrograde motion, Jupiter appeared stationary, possibly stopping over Bethlehem, before resuming its motion in the opposite direction. In December of the year 2 BC, the 9 biblical qualifications for the star would have been potentially satisfied. Whatever the astronomical explanation of the Star of Bethlehem, the Word of God tells us He also made the stars, and a star shall come out of Jacob. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on earth. And John wrote, Jesus is the true light, the light of the world, to govern the day and the night. Psalm 22, for the kingdom is the Lord's, He is the governor among the nations. And to separate light from darkness, the light of salvation from the darkness of sin. As a scientist, I have come to believe that wherever science falls short, faith must do. Science may never explain the true mystery of the star. Faith alone will.